Welcome back from the break. After our journey to Scotland and learning from the innovative things they're doing in the social entrepreneurship sphere, we're now back in Canada. Today, I'm joining this virtual event from the University of Calgary, which is situated on land adjacent to where the Bow River meets the Elbow River. The traditional Blackfoot name of this place is Mohkinstsis, which we now call the city of Calgary. Our moderator and panelists are joining us from territories including the Odamin ward of Amiskwati, Waskaikan, also known as Edmonton, in Treaty 6 territory. Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people in which Nova Scotia resides. The unceded territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, which we now call Vancouver, British Columbia, as well on Fogo Island as part of the ancestral homelands of Beothuk, the island of Newfoundland as the homeland of the Mi'kmaq, and Labrador as the homeland of the Innu of Nitassinan, the Inuit and Nunatsiwak, and the Inuit of Nunatu-Kabu. We have many attendees from Canada and beyond today, so please share with us where you're joining us in the chat. My name is Kaili Zhu, and I'm the Director of Student Success and the Director of the Trico Foundation's Social Entrepreneurship Center in the Haskayne School of Business. I'm delighted and honored to welcome you to Pivot on Purpose 2021. In 2019, the Haskayne School of Business hosted the Social Enterprise Award in collaboration with the Trico Foundation. Recipients of the Social Enterprise win an incredible $100,000 to further their work in social entrepreneurship. In this session, we will hear from 4 previous recipients of this prize, including where they are today and how their pandemic journey through 2020 to now has impacted their work. This session is meant to be interactive, so please use the chat to share thoughts and comments. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to submit them to the panel, which can then be upvoted by other members in the audience. We will try to get to those questions first. Remember to use hashtag POP2021 on social media if you're sharing snippets of the POP Summit. We're also delighted to offer French translation of all the sessions today and tomorrow. Please look for the globe icon called Interpretation at the bottom of your screen to choose to listen to the French translation stream. For this session, our moderator is Jane Bisbee, Executive Director of the Social Enterprise Fund. She is also on the steering committee for the Alberta Social Economy Ecosystem Development. I'm going to hand over the mic to Jane now to introduce herself and the panelists. Jane.
Thanks so much, Kylie, and welcome to everyone here. Hopefully I'll see the various members of the panel pop up soon. I am speaking to you from Edmonton, Alberta, and if you have looked at the bios of the panelists, you'll know that we have an amazing group here. We could spend an hour talking about each one of them. So we're going to try to get right to it. I'm going to refer you to read those full bios, and I will just give you a basic introduction at this point. We have Doug Aason, who's the Director of Business Development from the Embers Staffing Solutions in Vancouver. We have Dan Kershaw, the Executive Director of the Furniture Bank, which if you look at where they started, it was Toronto, and he is now speaking to us from Nova Scotia. We'll hear more about why that is. Zita Cobb, who's the co-founder and CEO of the Shorefast Foundation, and her other business card reads Innkeeper of the Fogo Island Inn on Fogo Island, Newfoundland. And Karen Ramchuk, the President and CEO of Women in Need Society, better known as WINS, out of Calgary. So welcome and thank you all for this. I do hope we will have a chance to have a good conversation amongst this lively group. I don't think I'm going to be able to stop them. But first, I'm going to do a couple of rounds of questions just to give you a picture of the kind of work that they do, and so we can see some of the similarities and differences. when Dan overall asked me to do this, he said I could get to ask mature, experienced social entrepreneurs, whatever it was that was bugging me. So I get to start with some things I'm fascinated by. And I often have observed that really successful social entrepreneurs are the ones that recognize a business opportunity when they see it. It's kind of like a radar or DNA capacity they have to see. They have a mission, but they actually see a business that comes from that. So I want you to cast your eyes back to your minds back to before the before times, before COVID. We will get to COVID, but I would like to just to get an idea and a feel for the kind of business that you had back in normal times. And Karen, let's start with you.
Sure.
You started in 1992, one single thrift store, and then suddenly you had a whole lot more. Can you tell us a little bit about why a thrift store? What took you to that as a model for business?
So I wasn't the founder, but the founder started the thrift store because she actually escaped to a shelter one night with nothing but the clothes on her back. And when she needed clothing, they sent her across the street to a church basement to rummage through bags to look for clothes that she could wear. So she was very business-minded, I guess, for lack of a better word. And she approached the 5 women's shelters in Calgary at the time and said, there's a much better way that we could do this with respect and dignity for the women that you're taking care of in your shelters. And she suggested to start a thrift store, and she would run it. It would pay her salary, and everything in the thrift store could be sold to cover the business costs, and the rest of the product can be given away to women in need. So that's hence where WINS came from.
So seeing customer right off the start.
Yes,
Making that
absolutely.
connection. Dan, let's go to you at this point. Furniture Bank, how did you see that the sofa was the thing that was missing in the whole housing crisis?
Well, like sort of building off Karen's point is you have hundreds of thousands of people coming out of some form of crisis. We all know housing is very expensive, and our founder, Sister Ann, 25 years ago was walking into situations where people had a roof over their head, but they were sleeping on the floor and using milk crates to sit on and work on. And back then, Sister Ann left the apartment building that she was meeting a family, and there was a perfectly good sofa on the side. And very quickly, when we're all young and beer and pizza is available, we'll happily move furniture for a friend or for ourselves. But that ends very quickly. And Sister Ann got working with some local trucking companies, started to dabble with the idea of becoming a paid furniture removal service that would bring it into the charity so that we could then redistribute it through a delivery service. So that social enterprise has really started many, many years long before me, and has, like Karen, has gone from a single truck to multiple trucks. And we're now, distributing furniture that's, collected from both businesses and consumers. We cycle that through and back into the community within 72 hours.
I've got to ask about how many trucks, because you are quite the size operation now.
We're now 10 trucks. So half are split collecting from the community, and the other half are out delivering back out to the community.
So how do people get the furniture? Do they show up at a store and pick, or what? How does it work?
In the pre-pandemic days, we more or less we operate a showroom that sort of simulated a retail furniture store where agencies and the families would come to the location and hand select the home that suits them. In the pandemic, we had to pivot to virtual selection.
Right. Doug, you are known for the Embers Staffing Solutions. I think probably anybody who's read anything about social enterprise in Canada has sooner or later come across your organization. But what I was fascinated to finally learn is what Embers stands for. It actually is the East Side Movement for Business and Economic Renewal.
a mouthful.
You're a community development corporation, for heaven's sakes.
We are.
So and from what I've read, it was a long process of conversation before you finally landed on the business you were going to pursue. Can you talk a little bit about how that happened?
Absolutely. Our founder and CEO, Marcia Nosek, actually started to percolate the idea through consultative meetings within the community in the downtown east side, which is one of the poorest postal codes in Canada. And a lot of folks are turning to day labor there. And what was identified through these meetings was that the workers or the residents of the downtown east side that would go to these staffing agencies felt exploited, that they had to pay for equipment, that they were poorly paid and very poorly treated. So after a few years of really looking at this, it was launched in 2012, and I think it was a slow go for sure, but we didn't charge for equipment. We'd assist people to get to the job sites, and we paid them better. And I think that first year, our revenues were around $560,000, and then in 2013, when we were recognized with the Trico Foundation Award, it was a little more. But today we're at $14.7 million, and from just around 260 workers put out for the year of 2012, we're up to 2,500 this past year. So it identified a need. We had a business focus, and we knew how to talk to our stakeholders, which were the companies that we work with. So it's been very successful for sure, and we're growing day by day, every day.
Did you start with a small list of customers buying your services, or were there a lot right off the get-go?
No, it was slow. We didn't know anything about construction. So being the brilliant person that our CEO is and founder, she acquired that person from another agency, and ensuring that this person had the same compassion and commitment to our mission. And we started to grow slowly. What really made the difference was that there's a community benefits agreement tied in to one of the projects in the downtown east side, which was to renovate 13 single room occupancy hotels. And that really launched us in a different way. That allowed us to grow to where we are today with 4 branches and over 400 workers a day out.
So that agreement, that benefits agreement, was from the municipality had put that in place, or
it was from the province?
From the province.
Correct.
And how long had it been there, and was anyone else taking advantage of it at the time? Because what a fabulous benefit for you. There's an opportunity, right?
Yeah, a tremendous benefit to the entire community, really, because it's focused on the community. But yeah, I think we were one of the first CBA agreements that came along, and really it was a home run. It's made all the difference in the world for the community and the workers.
Yeah, absolutely. So Zita, you're, I think, probably best known as the innkeeper at Fogo, because everybody knows about that fabulous hotel up on the rock there. But you're very much like Embers. At your core, Shorefast is essentially a community economic development agency as well. But how did you decide when you started, a hotel will solve this? Was it really the first opportunity, and how did you land on that? Because it's not obvious that a place that's far away from a lot of other places would start with a hotel.
Yeah, I think the inn, as we call it, Jane, it's like the sexy cherry, but on a very old cake. I always tell people it's the least important thing about Fogo Island. It just happens to be the nicest in pictures in some ways. We're kind of a classic, maybe not classic, but we're a community development, economic development organization, Shorefast. And we actually didn't start with the inn. And we use an approach, which is, I'm sure everybody here knows, called asset-based community development. And Fogo Island as a place comes by this very well, because in the late 60s, when the island was almost resettled, that's exactly what the people living on the island did then. And we kind of just did what they did and updated it. And we actually started with art, with something called Fogo Island Arts, which is a residency-based contemporary art program. But in the process of trying to figure out what to do, I mean, the goal was to build another leg on the economy to complement the fishery, because we still have a fishery and it's still our most important industry. But it's, as we say, essential but not sufficient. And so how do we complement that in some way that fortifies culture? Because with the collapse of the inshore fishery, we really were in danger of, now almost a full generation away from the inshore fishery, because now we fish for different things. We were really in grievous danger of losing our culture and heritage. And because our relationship with the sea still exists, but it's changed. And so when you really think about what are, the questions of asset-based community development, what do we know? What do we have? What do we love? What do we miss? And what can we do about it? It wouldn't take you very long to figure out that we're really darn good at hospitality. I mean, we are Fogo Islanders, but remember that means we're Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. And so there's something to that. And when you really, and if you think about an inn, it's a place to put everything we know, especially if you set out to build it yourself. It's like a handmade building, and everything in it is handmade. And so it allowed us to use our traditional boat building skills and bring them into contemporary furniture. All of the textile crafts that are here on the island are deep and long, and how to bring those into the present and then make them into contemporary objects. And food, our relationship with food. I mean, like every other community in the country, we lost our way and fell into a big pit of industrial food. Well, the inn gives us a chance to reactivate growing and to bring attention to food, and so on and on and on. Every sort of aspect of how we express ourselves culturally exists in the way we practice hospitality. So it was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you've teased those all out into other business streams as well, the furniture crafting and everything.
Exactly. Because it's sort of, we didn't set out thinking we were going to go into the furniture making business, but you do when the opportunity is there. And we invited designers to come from away and spend residencies with us and time with local makers and crafters. And out of that came these furniture pieces that are in the inn. And then we've since introduced other lines that are not in the inn. And so, yes, I mean, I think business is a tool of community. And we just got to make it act that way.
Yeah. And you've all kept your eyes open to what was presented as a possibility and went after it. Have there been any things that look like a possibility that any of you have seen that you then had to say, no, I have to think that this was a good idea, but it's just not going to go as a business? Anything that you had to walk away from as an opportunity?
On the cultural side, yes, because the way we're organized, Shorefast is a charity, and we have an organization called Shorefast Social Enterprise, which is a separate board that runs the businesses. Right. And on the other side are a whole set of charitable programs. And on the charitable programming side, we did start a professional theater company that we just had to give up.
That wasn't going to go. The rest of you, anything that you want to fess up that what you walked away from?
I can. Sorry, Karen, you go ahead.
Thank you, Doug. We started at Wynn's to do paid for furniture pickup, similar to Dan's model. And then the pandemic hit. And at that time, we couldn't go out to people's homes. So we found different uses for our trucks. So when it was time where we could start to go pick up again, our trucks were being utilized. So we either had to expand or do something different. So we actually went into partnership with other people moving products, so junk collectors or people like that, right, to actually do those collections for us. So just a shift there from where we intended to go. We had to stop it and find a new way to move forward.
Right. And Doug?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jane. It was really interesting because, we're becoming very successful quite fast. And I guess we got a little full of ourselves because we had carpenters and all kinds of skilled tradespeople. And we started our own renovations company called Green Renovations. And it quickly became apparent to us that that was not a good idea, because we got a phone call from one of our biggest customer saying that, hey, listen, we just found out that the people we're bidding against in this project is Embers. And if you want to work with us, I think you should reconsider the idea of entering the market at the scale that you're entering into, because you're going to be bidding against us, and that's not okay. And we took a look around and we thought, yeah, people love what we're doing. They want to work with us. And so it's heavily weighted in our favor. So we our CEO decided to step back from that. And it was we had to do it. It was a good idea. So we stepped back and laid that to rest.
Yeah. Dan, how about you? Did you have?
Yeah, it's actually in parallel to Karen's. We actually tried to get junkers to do the right thing. Now, it's important to understand charities can't work on free furniture. So everything, all of the goods that flow into our organization are given away for freely. We tried to work with junkers who, from their perspective, it was an opportunity for them to increase their revenues with some verified social and environmental impact without them having to do very much. They just get it to our. So a lot of it was trying to find, there was the economic tension of, we need good things, quality things, and we wanted them to go and do the transportation. But what we found is that it ended up becoming exploitive. It was always having to look over your shoulder and make sure, are these transportation partners actually doing what's right for our organization in partnership versus doing things that would ultimately harm. So we ended up pulling back out of that and sort of redoubling our own energy into expanding our own pickups, which has allowed us to take off. So
Right.
Karen, if you find that doesn't work, I've got lots of ideas.
I think, Dan, maybe we were a little bit lucky because the people we've partnered with, we were really considerate on who we chose to be our partners. So we actually found like-minded people. We found
That's great.
Single mom whose 2 kids work with her. They run 3 trucks. So they really align with us. So we're pretty happy with that partnership.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift this a little bit to the COVID pivot time, because things are progressing. You've got businesses that are working or being adjusted so that they do. And then the pandemic hits. So Doug, I understand that Perlator gave you a call. Do you want to tell us about what happened there and how that was a shift for you?
Yes, it's exciting. We got together as a team and we discussed, how to turn this into a positive. And so there's a number of things we did. One of them was approach Perlator in warehousing. And of course, as everybody knows now, that warehousing and Perlator and the Amazons and everybody are busier than they could ever have imagined. So Perlator liked our social mandate and focus, and they decided to give us a try. Well, one of their big things is inclusivity. So, certainly Embers is all about that. And the workers that we started putting out there demonstrated to them that, hey, this isn't just a charitable gesture on their part. It's meeting their business needs as well. And so that started to grow to the point where I think last year we had somewhere around 800 workers go out to Perlator sites. We did a video that we've attached for everyone's perusal, which is incredible, and it highlights the piece of inclusivity and tells a great story. So we did that video with the idea that we wanted to demonstrate nationally how important this relationship was to Perlator and aligns with their values. And Paul Merrick, the general manager for British Columbia or Western Canada, got a call from the president of Perlator saying that this is amazing. You guys are doing great. And so we continue to grow that relationship, and it's incredible.
Now, had you lost business because of the pandemic?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, CERB came along and everybody was surfing the CERB. We lost lots of workers, but, you know, sitting around at our leadership table, we decided that, hey, let's try security. Let's try sanitization crews on construction sites.
Right.
And we got hundreds of people more out to work than we had before. I mean, it was incredible, just visionary, really. That's
amazing. So I understand, Dan, you had a call from Ikea.
Yeah, it's so Ikea did a lot of great things across the country during this pandemic. And they called for two reasons. A, they wanted to make sure organizations across the country could benefit by the local stores supporting. So they ended up providing nearly $2 million of brand new flat pack furniture that needed to be assembled. I know WINS was a beneficiary, our organization was, and other organizations that do the similar type of homing that we all do. But at the same time, they also reached out to identify that they have a problem, which is, as an organization, they are trying to be a socially and environmentally responsible furniture retailer. So there is a lot of, they are trying to find solutions to their problems. So in their case, they have lots of returns, which historically they would, they recycle it, which is essentially going into a energy from waste system. And they knew the whole idea around this circular economy term is to move up the hierarchy, and that recycling is the last thing to do. And they realized that if you have a perfectly good mattress, it would be a whole lot better to get it to a family who can't afford one than to recycle it. So it ended up becoming a project that we're now into a six-figure contract with them, where they are contracting Furniture Bank in the 4 stores here in the Greater Toronto area to collect returned goods and process them through our social enterprise back into the charity. And that's starting to go beyond mattresses and into other products. And that's, I think there's as new opportunities, as we demonstrate we can succeed there, we're getting pulled into the next team and the next team. So it's snowballing in that we're demonstrating a small pilot in one store, and that quickly ripples to other stores.
Well, and your other pivot is to keep spreading that out further to other communities with the network that you're working on. Maybe tell us more about that.
Well, it's the idea behind a furniture bank is really simple. You take goods and you give them to the people who need it, and that's easy in a small scale. Most charities, when they think about replicating, they think about replicating everything they do in the local location. We've been investing in digitization since 2010. So, our organization is very technical. There's I say we're very nerdy charity. And it was as we were exploring on how to help other organizations, I get lots of inbound inquiries. I want to start a furniture bank. How do I do it? How do you do this? How do you do that? Our exploration looking inside the organization is, I don't know anything about Vancouver. I don't know anything about Calgary. My team, we have built up a technology that we use every day for ourselves to run a furniture bank. And that's the innovation that we're taking, which is, rather than trying to do everything in another community, we're taking that IT layer, as long as the internet's working, and making that available to other organizations. So we're working with the Furniture Bank in Ottawa right now. They're doing away with their systems and coming onto our system, so they don't have to spend the money on IT. They don't have to spend, the logistics and all of the things that most charities don't really want to do.
Yeah.
And then we're also another organization, OATP in Winnipeg, is also coming onto the system. And our hope is to standardize the measurement, the activities, so that, for those organizations that are in that furniture reuse, supporting homing, there's some standardization around, the messaging and the impact, while allowing every organization to have the freedom to operate locally.
So no need to reinvent the wheel. We should be sharing the design.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Karen, during the pandemic, you started 2 new businesses. Are you crazy?
Actually, Jake, it was actual necessity that caused us to do that. With the pandemic, we had to shut our retail stores. Our retail stores earn 80% of the revenue that we use to help 17,000 Calgarians yearly. So shutting our stores put us into crisis mode, and we had to think of new ways to generate revenue. So like all charities, we went out and applied for emergency funding. That was helpful, but we also, because we're a social enterprise, rely on ourselves and our business skills. So we actually looked at an opportunity to take items we were sending to recycle and saying, before we send them to recycle, could we do one last kick at the cat to try to generate revenue for our products? So the items that no longer make the grade at our regular thrift stores go to a bulk buying self-serve model of thrift that we call the More Store. Every item is sold for $1 or less, and the more you buy, the less it costs. We go up in increments of 250 pieces. So the price drops every 250 pieces. And then the other thing we did, we followed what all retailers were doing, and we grew our online business. So we launched an online thrift subscription box service called Twice New. So we have a designer in-house who puts curated looks together into packages sorted by style and size. And you can go online and buy a Twice New outfit or box from Wins, and it gets shipped to your home. So we had to go the e-commerce route and really try and grow what we were doing.
So this is the Keep Calm, I'm Going Back to Work box.
Absolutely.
I love that one. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
$60 for 6 pieces. That's huge. Yeah.
And we do try to ensure there's one designer piece in every box minimum.
Nice.
So
So Zita, I imagine running the inn during a pandemic was a bit of a quick stop for a while, at least. But I'm particularly interested to also hear about the work that you're really taking on around the community economic pilot that you're working on. But maybe first ask you about, how did the businesses do, and did you have particular pivots that you had to do that's now led you to the bigger project that you're working on?
Well, running the inn during the pandemic was really easy, Jane. It was shut down.
Yeah.
There was no one to feed, no one to love.
That was it, just a dead stop.
It was a disaster, really, because it's Newfoundland and Labrador as a province left the country because we put a ban on Canadians coming. So as soon as the ban was in place, it was over. And so we laid off a huge number of people. You know, can imagine how painful that is in a small community where we employ about a third of the households.
Yeah.
And then it was just a battle to survive, because the bills don't stop. The insurance bills, I think, doubled in that time because nobody wants to, insure the hospitality sector, and on and on and on. So it was, it really was 15 months of battling to survive. And we've come through it with a lot more debt, a lot of COVID debt. So anyway, that's the bad news. The good news is, because we weren't taking care of people and cooking for them and all of that, we did have a bit more time because we got into the smallest ball that we could and then focused our efforts on the part of our work has always been there, but perhaps didn't get enough attention, which was how do we work with other communities to distill good and best practices around community economies? How do we put communities into the economy? Because most people think that, you know, the economy is a bunch of companies that are loosely kind of regulated by government, and communities are, on a good day, not as coherent and organized as they should be to exert economic agency. And so we kicked off that project, and we are 5 months into it now. So that was the good thing.
I would add, not only do communities not get included in the economy, but I've been driven crazy hearing governments talk about the economy without including nonprofits as part of the economy.
Mhm.
And that somehow your corporate structure depends on how you work inside of the economy. So that's really important work that needs to be done.
We have framed it, you know, in the kind of Rajan frame. He's an economist from the University of Chicago who wrote a book called The Third Pillar, and it basically says human societies rest on 3 pillars. And I do think there's actually a 4th pillar, and actually we've spoken with him about that exact thing. But he says, you know, markets, governments, and communities. And I do think there's a not-for-profit pillar, and it's definitely, well, it's doing a lot of heavy lifting as we hear today. I think we should get together, Karen and Doug and Dan. You have everything that's needed to go and clear out all the things that are sitting in the self-storage units around the country.
Absolutely.
That's a great idea. That would be fabulous. That would be now we have some questions coming in the chat, so I'm going to ask Kaili, you're going to give us some of that, help me read them.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's actually very relevant to what we're just talking about. So one of the questions is, did the pandemic create other gaps in the social enterprise ecosystem that need to be filled? Perhaps some of you would like to see to improve your own social enterprise.
Who'd like to take that one on?
Maybe I can start, Jane. I think that one of the gaps that has always been there, and again, I'm always going to speak from the perspective of a particular, well, any place-based community, especially one that's far from a financial center. And, you know, and when I say financial center, I think, you know, we only have 3 financial centers, maybe 4 in the country. So every other community will suffer, will recognize what I'm going to say, which is we don't have the plumbing for financial capital, wherever it's coming from, to flow into social enterprises or any other community-based enterprises in small and medium-sized places. Yeah. And that is an enormous problem that I think was exacerbated. I think lots of money was made in the pandemic, and it went off and did what it usually does. And I just think that challenge to build that plumbing got bigger.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you absolutely. People, I mean, what we do is we do that plumbing, we do that finance for social entrepreneurs in Alberta, and people said, "Oh, you must not have anything to do, because you wouldn't want to be putting money out in community during the pandemic." We've never been busier, because the social entrepreneurs see opportunities and respond to them and wanted to walk through them. So I agree with you absolutely. We need, and I get the sad phone calls from other places in Canada going, can you work here? And we've focused on home because we believe that we're better at investing when we understand the community. But it doesn't mean that we don't need us replicated everywhere. Anyway, I'll climb off that particular soapbox because it's one I believe in. Doug, I think you look like you were about to say something. Or Dan? Whoop.
Well, I can always talk. Two things. I've seen a lot of social enterprises be bold and brave during this time and do things that they wouldn't normally do. I watched the city of Toronto be bold and brave, and they tore down the traditional have to go here, have to get this approval, have to. They threw that out and initiated something called the Rapid Housing Initiative, where and they pulled us in because they were more or less shaking loose housing units and trying to get people access to them far faster than the traditional, wait 2 years. If you're lucky, you'll get something. So that, it was nice to see government take that approach, and they're loving it because they more or less free it up. Furniture Bank is there to actually create a fully ready to walk in space, and families are getting in there. And that's the city of Toronto's discovered that this is the model that they would like to move towards, and it's starting to create some more opportunities to scale some of the social enterprise work we do. But I'm also concerned that not every charity and nonprofit that has place-based, Zita, hats off. But for the organizations that had they don't have a leg to stand on going forward, that some of their traditional social enterprises or the reliance purely on fundraising is being disrupted, and it may not come back. And I worry, the giving, the rate of individuals giving to charities is declining. It's returning to the old trends, and that trend is getting worse, not better. So I'm worried about the ecosystem as a whole, that organizations like on this panel, we can self-generate the resources to invest in those opportunities that let us continue. I worry about the people who aren't on this panel, that don't think of us as business people, making money as being a bad thing, that there's going to be a real disruption in the charitable sector here in Canada.
I have to agree with Dan. One of the things that I watched, we partner with 100 agencies across the city. One of the things I watched is through the COVID and the emergency funding, they expanded their team so largely. My fear is now the emergency funding's over. If they're not savvy enough and cut back quick enough, they're gonna get into a lot of trouble quickly. And it makes me worry about the ecosystem as well, Dan.
Doug, anything you want to add, or shall we get Kaili to give us another question?
Yeah, sorry.
No.
So we had a partner, Green Renovations, in the community that, or Clean Start, yeah, it does cleaning and sanitization of, single room occupancy hotels, and they had a real manpower shortage, and they came to us. The city put us together, and as a result of that, they were able to grow their business tremendously through the pandemic, and we formed a partnership we didn't have, and then we stepped back, and they continue to grow. Another a gap that we see is in these smaller communities. Again, there's that access to service or opportunities. And so what we've done is we're trying to remotely service these couple of these communities so that we can work with people that may be facing barriers or other challenges, and provide them with employment opportunities as we continue to expand and move across Canada. And that came about because our partners were asking, and the city of Vancouver and other mayors and other cities were asking us, well, could Embers come here? Can you service us here in our town? And so, you have to have the right software, first of all, and like Dan is saying, to reach right across the country and have it user friendly and being accessible. If there's others that are in other parts of Canada to use, and so that they can service those areas as well. For us, it was, we have the software through a very painful process of growth, and we now have that, and we're able to provide this, and we're expanding like crazy.
I would be curious, though, of some examples that I've seen. I think absolutely the tools are necessary, but there's a special sauce in finding the right people to do something as well.
And I think that's part of our design was, when I got into this I'm 8 years into this sector. My background's, I'm a capitalist by nature. And when I got in there, I remember one of my friends said, charities be crazy, because the nature of the individuals, 90,000 organizations that represent, they all have their own way of doing things. And I think, to Doug's point, software allows us to be able to help as many organizations as want our help, but we don't have to insert ourselves into the local dynamic, insert ourselves to the boards and the volunteers and the staff and the nuances of one region or another, but allows us to still support, because it's every community creates its own culture and its own way of doing things. So I agree, Doug. Software works great. You can make it available to everybody, but each community has to decide how to use it.
All right, maybe we'll go on to another question, because I don't want to lose the time we've got. Kaili?
Sounds good. Yeah. So this one kind of builds on calling Karen crazy. So related to that, so when considering new opportunities for your social enterprise, whether in this challenging time or in normal times, how do you assess the potential risks versus rewards, and how do you decide to move forward or move on?
Great question. Who wants to talk about acceptable risk and leaping off of cliffs?
I can if
Sure.
you want me to. That's kind of direct.
Let's start there.
Yeah. So I believe that there's opportunity in almost any situation. First off, your organization has to be ready for a new opportunity. Your people have to be ready. You have to assess the situation. You have to look closely to understand the cost versus the return on the investment. You need to, in the case of social enterprise, determine where the investment comes from. And at the end of the day, you have to be a little bit brave, because it really is a risk, and you have to be dedicated and committed to making that new enterprise work. And it can be scary, and it can be hard, and there can be times where it's going the wrong way, and you have to reassess all the time and watch that enterprise grow, and watch where you're stumbling and course correct along the way. So I think it's finding the opportunity, really getting your head wrapped around the business end of it, and then driving it forward. And if it's going wrong, you have to say stop.
Dan, you've got.
Yeah, I'm building on that, Karen. It's pilot, fail fast, lose money fast, learn fast. This isn't build a monolithic 50-page document that's a business plan. That's forever ago when I had hair. Now it's, you have an idea. It starts with your internal culture. I arrived and let's do this. Scary, slow down. We're now at a point where people come up with an idea. How do we sell the first product to the first customer, and then to the next 10, and then to the next 20? And every time we do that, we learn. And I think it's really important to really highlight the culture within the organization. I think everybody on this call, the culture of our organizations are far more willing to try new things and try to fail, versus many organizations are the questions well, how do you know? You don't. It's how do you know people will pay market rates for furniture removal and actively compete against junkers dollar for dollar? You don't, but you start and you learn, and how do you create a furniture workshop for keeping good things out of landfill? We don't, but we started, and we started at low dollars that if we lost it, the board wouldn't lose their mind. But when we saw success, we pour on the gas. I spend more money. Anyway, that's be bold, but be willing to fail.
So culture does eat strategy for lunch.
Yes.
If I could just chime in, James. I totally agree with Dan, 100%, maybe even 110. There's, really our focus is as a business and with a social mission. And so it's like 60-40, and that's the way our CEO has directed us to operate. And that in turn has created a lot of opportunities, a lot of jobs. But to what we're discussing here, we've done analysis and market researches around expanding into other areas and different ways that we can do that and extensively so we can mitigate that risk. But secondly, we are very agile. To Dan's point, we're very agile. We're not encumbered by government to move. Our revenues, 97% are self-generated. So we sat down immediately at the table when this pandemic hit. We saw these opportunities for construction safety officers and for sanitization crews and for added security, and we jumped on it and we reacted, and we had dozens and dozens and dozens of people on sites making a lot of money for themselves and for Embers and allowing us to continue expansion. It is about being agile, being quick to respond to the environment and doing it. And like Dan says, hey, there's risk involved. If you fail, you learn, you move ahead, you mitigate your risk by good business decision making.
Zita, I think you had your mute off there for a moment.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I agree with everything that's been said. And I too come out of the for-profit world. That was my career was. And I agree with all that. I think, though, the word risk deserves some conversation.
Yeah.
Because when people talk about risk, they usually mean financial risk. They don't think about so much social risk or cultural risk or climate risk, or like we could name them all. And so, and our organization is a little bit different because we are very focused around community economic development in every move we make. And so we really try to work very holistically, relentlessly in consideration of the whole, which doesn't mean we're not incremental. We're incremental in how we tackle it because you can't do everything at once. But we probably have a dozen different things that are in various stages of development because, we can move this down the field a little bit. Like we've just started doing some preliminary thinking and research around seaweed and that potential as a business. Very nascent at this point. But if we don't start it this year and collect some spores, we won't be ready to start a business, next year. And, that will be a partnership with our fisheries co-ops. It all takes time. So we kind of have a very holistic plan, lots of irons in the fire. And I agree with Doug very much. Be able to be, as we used to say in the fiber optics business, is dynamically reconfigurable.
And that can apply to people as well, I would imagine. It's not just the businesses or the elements, or it's how you work with who you have to work with.
Exactly. And and I think that in sort of building a team, it is about having people that can have all kinds of muscles that can flex in different ways. And I think that's just the nature of entrepreneurship. And if you're going to be as a social enterprise, I think you have to be more entrepreneurial than the usual crowd because you have more things that you got to worry about and consider.
Yeah. I usually say that, people say, well, how do you train social entrepreneurs? Well, you take them to the MBA school and then you make them sit through all of those classes. But every once in a while you drag them into the hall and say, okay, you need to learn all that human resource stuff that they're teaching you. But you've exacerbated your cafe by deciding to staff it with at-risk youth who are still sleeping rough. Figure out what that means. And then go back in and learn everything that those guys are learning, because you're going to need to understand it and have a whole lot of other considerations that you take into. Anyway, Kaili, another question for us? Yeah,
for sure. This one kind of maybe takes us sort of one step further in the journey. Is when someone who's exploring social entrepreneurship, what advice do you have to offer? I think, when talking about exploring new business, there are some definitely that can be transferable, but anything else that the panelists can add?
Where to start? I see nodding and shaking of heads.
It's
Go ahead.
yeah,
Dan,
yeah.
ahead.
A lot of it's you have to. I arrived at Furniture Bank and all the staff were stuck with a fixed mindset. So I often talk about fixed and growth mindsets. Fixed mindset, no, we can't. They say, this infamous they. If your organization is, at every level, have people that are rationalizing why not to change or why not to explore. Zita, I call it my someday maybe list. I am unlike you. We have a long list of things that maybe we'll get to, but we got to get a little bit of information here, and it just sits and percolates. We've now got a culture where this is growth mindset, where we're looking, we're exploring, we're sharing. Organizationally, if you're stuck more in a fixed mindset, and you can Google it, fixed versus growth mindset, you're going to struggle having a social enterprise, because there's nothing certain about running a social enterprise. And organizationally, and that includes your board, have to be comfortable with exploring and walking around things and learning together. But if your organization and your board is really looking for precision and perfection and certainty with every decision, it'll be really stressful on the organization. I spent 3 years trying to, because you can learn to shift. It takes a lot to do it, but once you have that, then everybody on your organization could be part of creating those social enterprises. It isn't the ED coming up with a social enterprise. It is all the staff saying, what about this? Currently here at Furniture Bank, we're like, we need more bed frames, because we're not giving away, we don't have enough bed frames. So like, staff member says, well, why don't we make them? We get lots of waste wood. I'm like, hey, how do we do that? And staff go off and figure out how to create a portable, compressible bed frame. And we're starting, selling that first one, then the next 10. But ultimately, we want to be in a position one day that we're creating thousands of bed frames in a way that we ensure that everybody is getting not just a mattress, but the bedding and the pieces. So it starts early, but it really does start with your organization's mindset.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Dan's saying. I mean, that's 100% nailed it. Everyone needs to have the same vision, the same commitment, the same focus on moving ahead and taking risk if that's what you're doing. And my personal perspective is on this. Anybody that works for me knows that don't come to me with a problem. That's for sure. Don't come to me with a problem unless you have 2 or 3 possible solutions. Otherwise, it's a waste of space, The other thing is to look at this and be brave again, to take those risks. And I think importantly, it's about looking at maybe a business idea and seeing, well, what makes it different? What can I make? How can I make this different than what's out there already? And bring that to the table, and develop that and do your study and then go ahead from there. But that's what Embers has done. We're different in so many ways with any other staffing agency out there.
I wanted to just follow something a little further that came out of one of Dan's comments about the boards. What words of wisdom might you all have about how to recruit the skill set, and what's the skill set you need to recruit to a board for this kind of work? Maybe Dan, start with you, because you brought it up, but I think it probably affects everyone.
I'll let others speak to recruiting, okay. But I will, we've all sort of probably had different boards. I arrived and it was an operating board. And they were hooked on the outputs. They're hooked on the numbers and the this and then that. And it got in the way of the organization doing what the organization should be doing. Over time, we've ended up in having a smaller board that's more focused on strategy and figuring out how to support management to make better decisions. So, but it's a cautionary tale. You know, the wrong board can get fixated on things that they're comfortable with, given their professional backgrounds, rather than necessarily what the board actually needs to be supporting management with. So,
Zita, I know you have boards and
2 boards. We
Two
have
boards,
a board for the charity Shorefast, and then a separate board for the social enterprises called they're all grouped under something called Shorefast Social Enterprises. And actually they are slightly different, but not entirely different skill sets. And I think the mistakes that get made in figuring out who you need on your board is the prevalence of reductionist thinking. You know, everybody's got the grid, and do we have accounting, and do we have legal, and do we have this, and do we have that? And by the time you get all the boxes checked, you actually realize what we just did is bring 10 reductionist thinkers down on top of us. And we're supposed to be a creative organization that's changing the world and not following along the same old path. And so, you know, how do you find, now there are, let me be clear, lawyers and accountants that are not reductionist thinkers, but look really carefully at what they do when they're not at work. And so one of the things that I always look for is, do they have an interest in art, and are they aware of art, and do they pay attention to something that's outside of things that are strictly their profession? And I think then you've got the best, because you got the professions, but you actually, you know, maybe they've got some under exercised tendencies and muscles that can really blossom. And I agree with what Dan said very much. It's the best way to work with a board is to make sure they understand deeply the change you're trying to make. And then they're not going to get down on top of you and become over-focused with numbers. And the greatest success is when they do exactly what Dan said, which is actually help lift us up as people leading these businesses.
I saw a look of great recognition on Doug's face as you were talking.
Yeah.
Been there?
Yeah,
Done that?
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Zita makes some excellent points. My goodness. Marcia, our founder, CEO, has been very strategic in bringing board members to the table. And it's a real focus on what can they add to the organization. And they all have to have the passion for what we're doing. And some of them start out as volunteers, presidents of companies. We've had come in and in the morning at 5:30, 6 in the morning, drive workers to job sites to get a sense of really what we're doing, what we're all about. Of massive, very, very large Canada-wide companies. So we have CFOs that are incredible at, you know, analysis and that sort of thing. People connected into the industry that open doors for us right across Canada. So we're very strategic. Everyone is supportive. All the board members are supportive, and they, well, it's helpful to be successful, you know, but they allow us to make decisions and go with things. Just keeping them posted, informed, and what's going on, and we do it, and it's successful. But yeah, our board members are active board members, and they have a role to play, and they have a passion for what we're doing. So yeah, you don't want somebody out there that's going to, like Zita says, be sitting on top of your head and not any help at all, but hindering you for sure.
I'm going to ask a different question that I think reflects something I saw in the chat, which was social enterprise as a sales tactic. Do you make clear in your marketing and in your presence in community that you are a social enterprise? I've heard lots of lively discussion about this pro and con, and so I'd be interested in this group's take on it.
I can start with that, Jane, because that got lots of conversations. So when the Inn opened in 2013, we were deliberate, I would say, in not pointing out we call ourselves a community business because it's 100% owned by a charity, whose mandate is to serve this place. I didn't want to attract people on that basis. Well, first of all, I thought it'd be a bad marketing tactic because, how often have I traveled and it's like, oh, look, there's an eco lodge. Right. I know what that means. Cold water and bad sheets. I'm not going. And we are probably the most expensive place to stay in the country. And I really wanted us to stand up against the Amans and the Four Seasons and anybody else on the planet, except what we have is deep, deep, deep place-based hospitality and the most beautiful linen sheets and so really it's only been in more recent years. I mean, we led with architecture and design and community-based hospitality. And I would say most of our guests after they arrive go, oh, it's owned by the community. Like, we didn't know that. Why didn't you say so? It was like, it wasn't necessary to get you here.
Right.
So
Right.
I've changed a little bit in that. And I think we have started to message that earlier in a guest journey. But yeah, I mean, at some point, it just becomes kind of blah, blah. Now, I really think the most important thing, though, is that everybody who's buying something understands where the money goes. And I think that's something that we can all be much more and are willing to be and want to be much more transparent about as social enterprises than sort of regular for-profits, and like put it all out there. We have something called an economic nutrition label. We'll tell you exactly where it goes.
Yeah, which is great fun. That the labels are really interesting.
Yeah, Zita, love that nutrition label.
Yeah.
That's one of the things with our community economies work that we want to start. I'm going to be recruiting all of you, by the way. Besides the fact, I still think there are 3 businesses we could start before we hang up today, because of with all the skill sets that are here. Just think about it,
Yeah.
But the idea that we can create a national network. I agree with everything you're saying about tools and capacities that don't exist, and how do we make them more readily available so people are not trying to invent stuff that already exists. I mean, I just think we're just at the beginning of that sharing properly, but I think we need a platform.
Yeah, if I can add to what Zita's saying, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, we make the business case. I mean, we're talking about construction projects worth 300, 400, $1.2 billion with the St. Paul's Hospital project. We're talking about get the job done. So when I go in, I talk about the investment we make in training, $1.2 million last year, about, benefits our workers get from a temp agency's perspective, medical, dental benefits, training supports, all kinds of stuff like that. And it makes good business sense to them because they know we're invested in their business and we're committed to getting that job done and done on time and delivering. So we're a great partner. Nobody does what we're doing, and our workers are productive. They're motivated. So yeah, absolutely. The charitable thing, it's a nice benefit, that they're doing good, that sort of stuff. We tell that story. We put it up on our website when direct hires happen. But really, if you want to talk the talk, you have to talk the language, and that's business.
Yeah. Karen, how about you?
We're a little bit different. We actually use the good we do as our competitive edge.
Mhm.
We compete against, as you might know, other thrift stores that are large, maybe national chains, North American chains that are for profit. So when competing against them, we really rely on the fact that we're local and that we do a lot of good in our city. So we use it as our competitive edge against those big players.
And in our case, we stopped using the word charity. I find the labels get in the way of things, depending on who, as Doug was saying, if we're dealing with a household and they want furniture removal, they're calling Furniture Bank. They're not calling a charity.
Right.
Because we have, unfortunately, in this country and most countries, they hear the word charity and they think we do everything for free, happily, and nothing costs any money and all of that. And we just stopped using it. So, for organizations that understand what a social enterprise is, we'll certainly speak to it. But being earned income focused, we're competing. We do the same thing. We're your socially and environmentally responsible removal option, because every junker will happily take the same money and run it to the local landfill. It's, go mystery shop how many actually show up. I'm thrilled, Karen, you've got them actually coming to your store, because most of them just go straight to landfill. So yeah, it's really about who your audience is that you're selling to or engaging with. But yeah.
Right. A marketing decision, what it comes down to. Kaili, any other last questions? We're ticking down.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind giving people a round to exit on. So what
For
have you
sure.
got?
We may have time for another question. For organizations that are funded by other sources such as government, that potentially are faced with losing that funding. So since we're talking about pivoting on purpose, so when these organizations are exploring ideas about pivoting to a social enterprise, what some advice do you have for them?
Go for it, Dan.
A lot of it's just, can you see, I'll use our example. In Toronto, there are 35 junking companies that represent over 100 vehicles driving around the city every single day. And for us, way back when, it was like, we can do that. So it's looking at, is there a for-profit equivalent? Like Zita is highlighting, we're going to be the very best place to stay, period, in the world, hands down. That's where we're going, irrespective of the legal structure and sort of the behind the scenes. So for an organization, regardless of what their social mission is there a for-profit equivalent out there that it's not a big leap to move towards? It's not I'm this charity and I'm going to open up a parking lot. It's what is the business that's nearby to the mission that they're undertaking.
Zita? Any
I
reaction?
don't really have anything else to add to that particular question, Jane, but I was just going to say, maybe it exists and I don't know it, but I'd sure love to have a map of the country, community by community, and where are all the social enterprises? Just just who are we and where are we all hiding? Like I'm looking at you people thinking, God, why haven't I met you before? This is really great.
It's all those miles. We need to get a train going and stop in every community.
Oh, that would be good. But first, let's build the digital equivalent of that.
Yeah, okay. In the meantime. Doug, any last words for us?
No, just that it's a great panel, very interesting. And I think, it's great to hear our colleagues across the country and hear what they're doing, the similarities and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I agree with what Dan, it's just a recap for us.
And Karen?
In response to what Kaili asked, one of the things that I know, it has to be a natural fit. You have organizations that want to start a social enterprise. It's got to be somehow a natural fit to what you do. Otherwise, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be really hard. And then for last words, the words that I heard the most today, opportunity and agile, which are so near and dear to my heart. As a social enterprise, we're always looking at every opportunity, and we know to be agile as one of our most important traits. And I heard it repeated over and over by everyone on the panel. So I just wanted to reinforce that message.
Well, and with that, I unfortunately have to bring this fabulous discussion to a close. Thank you all for your generosity and for playing along and for giving us your wisdom. I really appreciated it. And I'll turn it back to Kaili.
Yes, just to reiterate that, thank you for an illuminating discussion. And it's great to see that we have great work being done in this space from coast to coast, literally Fogo Island to Vancouver. So that's great. We're going to take a quick break and be back for the next session, which is Social Entrepreneurship for Lunch. It's an interactive session that will teach you tools such as 4 ways of impact and the blender. And these tools are used in social entrepreneurship classes today. So don't forget to bring your lunch, and we'll see you shortly. Thanks, everyone.